Burnaby North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, including the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. I thank them for their generosity in letting us conduct our business here. I would also like to thank the people of Burnaby North for trusting in me to be your representative, but more importantly, for trusting in yourselves and each other that together you could make a difference. I am so honored to be standing here to speak in favor of this budget update that is already beginning to make such a difference in the lives of the people in my community. I wish my parents were still alive to witness this moment. I'm here today because of the example they set and the values they taught me. My parents were simple people who used simple words to express simple ideas: love, fairness, justice, mutual respect, community, family, hard work, joy. My parents had a good life, but it wasn't without struggle. They met during the Second World War when they were both enlisted in the Canadian Army. In fact, my mother was the first person in her tiny Ontario farming community to enlist. She didn't actually get to finish high school until she was in her 40s. Yet the war taught her that she had a place in history and that she could make a difference in the world. As a child, I was encouraged to fiercely debate current events around the dinner table. I was encouraged to have strong opinions and to state my opinions, but only if I could back them up with facts and never use them as weapons to make others feel bad. And even during the age of Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, my parents believed that I could be anything I wanted to be, even though I was a girl. They gave me the confidence to be the first person in our family to go to university. But it was low tuition fees and interest-free loans that made it possible. And though they suffered from debilitating illnesses and stressful working conditions, my parents always found the time and the grace to give back to the community. As a Little League coach, as a Girl Guide leader, as a church elder, those were the people who set me on the path of public service. But there are so many more who helped me along the way. I particularly want to thank my husband, who believed I was a leader long before I even believed it myself, and for being so wise, so strategic, and so compassionate. I want to thank my son and his wife, who are raising two amazing children, who at 9 and 12 already give me reason to believe that when it's time for their generation to take the reins, our shared future will be in good hands. I know that when they get home from work and school tonight, my family will be watching a recording of this speech and cheering me on. I want to thank my community of friends and neighbors, near and far. Some I've known almost all my life, some I've met recently, brothers and sisters in the labor movement, comrades in the social and environmental justice movement, many of whom played leadership roles in my election campaign, all of whom helped me find my political voice. I wouldn't be here without you. During and since the election, I've heard many versions of the same story. After 16 years of BC Liberal neglect, life here has just gotten too hard. Not only has life become too expensive, it's become exhausting. Long commutes, constantly organizing fundraisers to subsidize the kids' schools, waiting on hold for critical services, juggling 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet. Before May 9th, I met far too many people who had simply given up on politics. Some told me they were overwhelmed by their lives and couldn't keep up with the news. They told me they didn't feel competent to vote. Others had stopped voting or never even started voting because they didn't believe it would make a difference. Like Curtis, a young First Nations father of 2, we met on the street during the election. Curtis told me he had never voted, didn't see the point, nothing ever changes. I asked him what he thought of the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion. He told me he was opposed to it. I said, so is the BC NDP. And if we form government, we will do everything in our power to protect our environment, protect our economy, and thousands of existing jobs. So he said he'd vote. I am proud to say that one of our first actions as government was to announce that we would join the legal challenges and not one shovel would be put in public land until the province fulfilled its duty of meaningful consultation with Indigenous people concerning this project, and outstanding provincial environmental management plans were completed. Curtis, you did make a difference. And so did you, Lena. I know you worked hard to convince members of your community to get out and vote, many of whom did so for the first time. And you told me that the new spending we had committed to improve the education system and help children succeed was a relief to you as a grandmother. And Skye, I'm relieved that after years of waiting, your little boy has finally been diagnosed, and that new money in the education system in Burnaby means he will now get the classroom support he needs to thrive. Soon after the election, I was contacted by a young man who rents an apartment on the 8th floor of his building. He told me that one of the elevators in his building had been broken for 2 months, and that both of them stopped working 2 weeks ago. He was particularly worried about his elderly neighbor who was essentially trapped in her apartment. Not only that, the mail wasn't being delivered, and tenants had to go to the post office to pick it up. Luckily, this young man grew up in a union household, so he knew the power of organizing. Within hours of him posting notices inviting fellow tenants to a meeting, the elevators were fixed and mail delivery was reinstated. Sadly, this kind of story is all too common. I was also contacted by a senior who's been on the BC housing waiting list since 2011. In the meantime, she lives in substandard housing, and her landlord refuses to undertake repairs. She did file a complaint with the residential tenancy branch, but it remains unresolved. It just shouldn't take so much work to get your landlord to treat you with respect and dignity. Our government is going to invest $7 million in new funding over the next 3 years to improve the residential tenancy branch. We are sending a clear message to landlords and tenants alike. With more resources, more complaints will be resolved more quickly. Furthermore, we are committing to invest $208 million over the next 4 years to support the construction of more than 1,700 new units of affordable rental housing. These kinds of units are desperately needed in communities like ours in Burnaby North. Let me tell you about Tiffany and Tobias. They live in a beautiful but small condo in my community, and they just had their second child. They want to stay in the neighborhood but need another bedroom, and they just can't find anything that they can afford. To make matters worse, Tiffany calculates that when she returns to work, her take-home pay will be $30 after she's paid for childcare. And speaking of childcare, I met a young man during the election who came to BC from Quebec. Emile told me that as a child, he had personally benefited from $10 a day childcare, It was Quebec's system of universal, affordable childcare that permitted his single-parent mother to work and support her family. I know that it's going to take a lot of work to implement $10 a day childcare here in BC. As a member of the Childcare Working Group, made up of ministers and government MLAs, I am eager to get started. I look forward to talking to parents, childcare professionals, and other stakeholders to make sure we get it right. Childcare is an investment in our shared future. I was recently contacted by the founder of a biotechnology company in Burnaby. Let me quote what he wrote. "We have been profitable and employ 10 people. Most are scientists who are well compensated. Nevertheless, the incessant and irrational increases in real estate are having a destabilizing effect on the company, as founders are contemplating taking capital out of the company to buy houses before they rise still further. I hope you realize the profound effects these irrational house price increases are having on allocation of capital. Instead of capital being allocated to start and sustain businesses, including those in the knowledge economy, enterprising people are allocating capital to invest in houses. Swapping and speculating on houses will not grow an economy and create jobs. The ability to attract and retain talent is impaired, and young people taking on huge mortgages at the precise time in their lives when they should be taking risks to establish new enterprises is lamentable." This constituent went on to attribute the housing crisis to the previous government's unwillingness to curb speculation. I am proud to say that our government will act to close speculation loopholes, reduce tax fraud, and money laundering in the BC real estate industry. The Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion, skyrocketing costs of housing, no childcare, these were the issues that came up most frequently on the doorsteps of Burnaby North during the election, and at the bus stops, in the parks, and the coffee shops. But they weren't the only issues that voters raised with me. They asked us to increase funding to the education system, to improve the transit system, to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and we are working on all of those priorities. I am so proud to be part of a government that is moving quickly to make life more affordable for the average person in Burnaby North, to invest in the services they need to create a sustainable economy for everyone. My commitment to the people of Burnaby North is anchored by something that happened a couple days before the election happened on May 9th. My team and I were handing out material at one of the SkyTrain stations. It was early morning, travelers were in a hurry, they weren't really interested in engaging. But this one guy rushed by and he called back to me and he said, "I already voted for you, don't let me down." And I've been haunted by that encounter ever since. I'm happy to say that right after our throne speech, this guy, and I've since found out his name is Oswaldo, tracked me down on Facebook to say, "Thank you, keep up the good work." Others have reached out to tell me it's a good start. I agree with them. It is a good start, but there is so much yet to do to create a better BC for the people who have been left behind for the last 16 years, and it won't be easy. We'll be questioned for daring to suggest that we can bring in affordable childcare, for daring to suggest that those at the top in our province can pay a little more, for suggesting that creating good family-supporting long-term jobs goes hand in hand with protecting our environment. We will be questioned for daring to hope. I am confident that hope is exactly what the people of Burnaby North want. That is what they voted for on May 9th. I'd like to conclude by returning to the story of my parents. They sacrificed their youth to go to war to save the world, literally. And they did it with the expectation that their generation was creating a better world, a better life for future generations. And they did. The post-war years was a period of unprecedented prosperity in British Columbia and it saw the introduction of important social programs like health care, pensions, and unemployment insurance. In the years immediately following the war, my father-in-law was an unemployed single parent. He wasn't able to care for his 4 children, and his only option was to put them in an orphanage. But then after 4 years, he got a good union job with benefits at Fraser Mills. He purchased a lot, he built a house, and was able to bring his children home. He worked there for more than 30 years and was able to retire in dignity. But Fraser Mills doesn't exist anymore, and the good family-supporting jobs, like those in so many other foundational industries, have disappeared. And the social safety net my parents' generation worked so hard to knit together has come unraveled. And the sad part is that the growing income gap, the growing rate of child poverty, the reversal of the fortunes of so many British Columbian families didn't happen by mistake. It happened as a result of deliberate choices made by the BC Liberal government. It happened because of their blind trust in an economy that only works for those at the top. I am proud to be part of a government that rejects dog-eat-dog survival of the fittest economics. I'm proud to be part of a government that is choosing to invest in people. The voters of Burnaby North called for it. Our budget update supports it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.